and coming in an hour sooner so that Mr. Fearborn and staff have an opportunity to make the initial presentation and answer any questions you might have, and for thoughtful interaction that'll occur through this evening. So I thank the staff for providing us dinner tonight so that we can continue to move forward this evening at a fast pace. And while the rest of us are still consuming our dinner, Mr. Fearborn would like to go ahead and start with his presentation. So, Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mayor Turnbow, members of the City Council, the proposed operating and capital budget for the fiscal year 2019 are hereby submitted for your consideration. The formal budget process actually began 167 days ago on March 6. However, it really begins for the next fiscal year on the first day of the current fiscal year. The reason for this is that for the budget to have the greatest positive impact and provide the greatest service to our citizens, the items contained in these pages must be forever scrutinized and evaluated for their merit and their effectiveness. What worked 2 fiscal years ago and was great may not be as effective today or even good for our citizens in our city in this particular fiscal year. By using the elements of the strategic plan as a starting point for the budget, we have the goals that we always want to be striving for within the current budget. Henry Ford said, "Obstacles are those frightful things you see when you take your eyes off the goals." We must always keep sight of what we are trying to do for the city and our great citizens. This proposed budget provides a guideline of targeted government services that are continuously evaluated while always keeping those goals in sight. And so we'll begin with the budget detail and jump right in. A reminder to the council is an overarching item. The budget is actually formulated using a zero-based budget approach and target-based budgeting. That allows for staff to come to me without benefit of simply using a number from the previous year and increasing it automatically in this year. They have to prove up each of the line items within the budget. They have to prove those up using the target-based budgeting approach so that we have the most efficient and effective use of those funds in hitting target areas that we know are council and citizen priorities. As I'm presenting, I'm going to be going through the city manager's proposed budget detail that begins on page 25. With the numbers that I am quoting, you may want, if that's the way you like to follow, from the narrative, I would encourage you to go to page 25 and follow along with me. If you're the sort who likes to see it in the summary format, the summary for the general fund that we'll be beginning with is on page 35, if you just want to follow along in there, and I'll try to reference. And of course, as I'm presenting the detail, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in and interrupt, and just let me know where we're at. It's important as we begin the fiscal year 2019 that we know how we ended fiscal year 2018, or we're projecting to end fiscal year 2018. We can't make that projection without looking back and truing up and finalizing the numbers that last year at this time we were projecting for fiscal year 2017. So that's our beginning point. You probably won't remember, but in that last year at this time, the amount that you see on page 35 that is now $238,429, last year at this time we were projecting that revenues over expenses were going to be $55,643. In fact, that number came in at the $238,429. Obviously, a considerably higher balance than we thought that we were going to have was then the result of that by $182,786 for a total actual beginning balance in the current fiscal year of $3,397,540. And on page 45, the difference between that is where we begin. The $3,397,540 is the projected for 17-18 versus at the beginning of the year, we thought that number was going to be $3,214,754. During this current year, we see a situation that we are expecting the expenditures for the year to be down from what we had budgeted by $423,348. Almost half of that number is in PD. A considerable amount of that 50% is in police department salaries. You can't always make it up even with overtime, and as much as that department has been depleted relative to personnel, that's where we see a considerable, I'm going to call it a savings, but we need to be careful about that. But they also realized a considerable amount of true savings along with a number of our other departments. As you click down the list, you see 10,000 under budget here, 50,000 under budget there, which is really an attribute to prudent spending and conservative budgeting patterns on the part of all of our department heads and our staff members. Along with that, we are also expecting revenues to come in $295,476 higher. The primary reason for that is obviously fees and permits. You hear every single month about our housing starts being well above the 175 that were budgeted, so we're seeing that. Of note, as far as going the other direction, the primary erosion in our current revenues is being realized in our franchise taxes, and specifically our wireless franchise taxes, because of the new application of the way people are using their phones. The portion that is attributable to actually using it as a telephone is going down compared to using the data, and we cannot tax on data usage, only the phone usage associated with that. We are also seeing, once again, a considerable erosion due to Senate Bill 5 and the Supreme Court action within the municipal court department. So the higher revenues of $295,000 combined with a higher beginning balance of $182,786 and lower than budgeted expenditures in the current fiscal year of $423,345 lead to a projected fund balance that is $901,607 higher than the budgeted amount of $3,175,073. That's how we ended last year. That's how we are currently projecting to end this year. And that will leave you with beginning fund balance again, beginning in fiscal year 19 projected of $3,175,073. Any questions on how we get to fiscal year 2019? Perfect. Talking about revenues for fiscal year 2019, an overarching assumption that we want to discuss with the council is a number of the revenues that are created throughout the budget are based on not just fees and permits, but the amount of water that we're going to sell, the amount of electrical franchise that we're going to take is dependent on the number of housing starts that we're budgeting for. In last year, we raised that to 175. We exceeded it in a significant number of discussions with staff, and particularly Mr. Cataret. We are lowering that expectation for next year to 120 by 50 starts to 125. So 125 is the budgeted expectation for housing starts next year as we get to each of those particular revenue items. Discussion on the property tax. At this time, the council knows exactly what the property tax is going to be. You had your first reading for it in the public hearing last week. Property taxes are budgeted in the general fund to be $71,496 higher than they were in fiscal year 2018. Because there is no change in the levy and it wasn't an assessment year, that growth in the amount of revenue that we're going to be collecting is specifically attributable to the actual growth in number of homes. It's not an assessed valuation increase that's associated with that. Franchise taxes are anticipated to be $27,474 higher than the fiscal year 2018 projected amount. Again, the 125 new residents is attributable to that. Sales taxes. The sales tax receipts in fiscal year 2019 are budgeted to be $177,989 higher than the fiscal year 2018 adopted budget amount, and $11,046 higher than the fiscal year 2018 projected amount. The conservative budgeting relative to the sales tax, as I remind the council each year, assumes no revenues in sales taxes that we don't know for certain that we're going to realize. In other words, we think that there is going to be a retail outlet go in the Cadence property. That is not accounted for here because it's not there yet and we are not collecting revenues. If you look back at 2018 and we compare the fact that we're going to be 5.29% higher in the budget this year than what we budgeted last year, yet only the 0.31% higher than projected, is that same thing. Next year, you'll probably see the exact same thing. We're budgeting for a lower amount, but we know that there is going to be sales tax collected on the horizon from businesses that are more than likely going to come in, but we don't want to assume the revenue until it's actually being realized. We assume no revenue not being realized. We assume that every expense that's being budgeted is going to be realized. Matter of conservative budgeting. Any questions on that one? Okay. Fees and permits, as previously stated, they are anticipated to be $145,532 higher than the fiscal year 2018 budget. That reflects 125 homes. The average fee for each new home is $1,200.
Excuse me, sorry. One quick question, Jim, to clarify what you just said. The 5%, could we say that that's the actual amount that sales tax increased this year? Would that be fair to assume that based on what you just said?
Only over the budgeted amount. In other words,
Okay.
we budgeted conservatively last year, so we saw what we realized was a 5% increase.
So with what we budgeted was basically no increase from the actual amount from the previous year.
Exactly.
So it would be fair to say that the actual amount that it increased this year was 5% based on new businesses.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes. That moves us to, I want to just very, very briefly, in the revenue section for fiscal year 2019, again, a revenue that's not being realized, so we're not budgeting for it, but we are currently in discussions with West Peculiar Fire to take the dispatch services over that are currently being administered by Lee Summit, and we would also be collecting the fees associated with those dispatch services. We see those as being just north of about $30,000. But again, not realizing it, so we do not have them in here. Transfers, pretty straightforward. Not a lot of changes in the transfers. Transfer from the transportation fund to help the general fund, transportation-related expenses, $320,000 budgeted in fiscal year 2019. Transfer from stormwater to, again, directly offset our stormwater costs associated with the stormwater department in the general fund, budgeted for fiscal year 2019 at $295,000. Transfer from the enterprise fund. The formula, again, is when you go to the enterprise fund section, there is a transfers out from the enterprise fund section. You can see the methodology that we use for that, but it's a combination of both an indirect cost and a direct cost that are associated with the general fund providing services to the enterprise fund. That amount this year, $829,280. Capital project administration and inspection. This is the one you'll remember from last year. I'm always just a little bit edgy about this one because in years where we are inspecting and doing the administration over, say, $10 million worth of GO bond projects, this amount goes up considerably. And then in a year like this where those have all flushed through for fiscal year 2019 and that work is done, they go down. The only one that you see in here for this year is the normal street preservation work that we do, and we do the administration and inspection over that. So it is down from last year by $6,000. You'll remember last year we actually had the surplus of revenue over expenses at the beginning of the budget year that I suggested to you all that not be spent on recurring costs because it would rapidly disappear in a year, and here's where we're at, and fortunately we didn't spend any of it. So, any questions before we get into on the revenues that are associated with fiscal year 2019 in the general fund? Terrific. Compensation, benefits, and staffing. Primarily, I would describe the budget that I am proposing to the City Council as primarily a maintenance budget. There's not a lot of wow factor in it that's visible. The wow factor that this budget has that is incredibly visible to our citizens every day is our staff. And so I am proposing that we continue to move our staff through the chart, that we improve the chart before we move the staff through. We improve the chart, each step of the chart by 1.5%, and then we step everybody through to the improved step. Any questions on that one? And the salary chart, what that does to the salary chart, you can see in the appendix section under the personnel. Health insurance benefits, we have budgeted for a 15% increase overall. At this writing, the final quotes are not back from Blue Cross Blue Shield. The initial quotes are, we took it out to bid. This benefit, that particular medical benefit is the greatest challenge of this budget. Blue Cross Blue Shield is refusing to budge off of a 20% initial figure. To get it down from that number in any way, we may as well not be offering a benefit. It eviscerates just about every element. The plan does not even look the same. They are dug in and they are staying there. We put it out for bid. We received 2 very qualified bids from United Healthcare and from Cigna, and we're looking at those plans. The Cigna plan that is in place is no change in any of the elements from what we are currently offering through Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have a few weeks to continue those negotiations before we hit a drop dead date on it. I will certainly at our upcoming City Council work sessions on the budget be updating you on what is happening there. Loggers. Loggers' contribution from the city as a whole, you'll remember that we are a non-contributory, meaning the city pays the entire amount of loggers. Loggers is going from 15.7 to 15.9 for the general population, and for our sworn population of officers, it is going from 16.6 to 17.6. That is one of the steepest, that 1% is one of the steepest jumps they have ever realized. Loggers, you'll also remember, some years can go up, some years it goes down, depending on the actuarial amounts and who's in, who's out. They can't really speak to it. Anecdotally, I don't wonder if that 1% jump is attributable to our discussions in the past weeks about the number of people who are jumping out of the profession. And now they're actually being paid once they've left, especially if they're vested, and that would increase an actuarial amount. Municipal court, at the beginning of last year, I had proposed to the city council that the municipal court clerk position be moved from a half-time position to a whole-time position. That was in anticipation of a significant amount of work that we were projecting that would be caused by the documentation associated with Senate Bill 5. That did not manifest itself to the fullest extent, and we are also seeing a lot of a good accounting from our new municipal court administrator, who is very much able to keep on top of a lot of that paperwork and that reporting mechanism that we thought would fall to the clerk. So I am recommending to you all that the position be moved from full-time to half-time. That's been discussed with both Ms. Furr and with the judge, and they're both in agreement on that particular move. Probably the most significant personnel move is I am proposing to the city council. We have over 20,000, from last year, we have over 20,000 square feet of new building, and we are stuck on one building technician to take care of all of that. I am proposing, as well as take care of the exterior of the buildings. Snow events, has to plow sidewalks. Some of these buildings have to be open on snow event days as well. Proposing an assistant building technician. Propose that particular position go to range 1, which is the first range on the salary chart, along with the office assistant's position. Step 1, $13.42 an hour. Of course, full benefits would also be included with that particular position. But we have to keep the buildings open, and we have to keep them clean, and we have to keep them in first-class condition. And I think looking to the future, that's a position I would strongly recommend to the council. Next personnel item that I'd like to talk with the council about is adding back the city planner position to the salary chart and to the position roster. The city planner position was the last position out during the bad time in 2008. It probably shouldn't. We always knew it would be reinserted at some point, and that the workload was going to require it, and the level of expertise that is needed in there for a fast-growing city would be needed. This particular recommendation to you all does not call for the position to be filled at this time. I'm sure it will be in the near future, but it does not call for it right now. It is simply because the position control roster and the salary chart are elements of the budget. I would recommend inserting it back in so that when the time is correct, we can have that position ready to go on council's approval. The last item I want to talk to you about actually wasn't in my budget transmittal letter, but just want to update you on an item. The council will remember that the assistant city manager's position was left on the salary chart. just like I've just now been talking about the city planner's position. And I outlined when I created the 2 assistant to the city manager's position that I had a 3-year transitional and succession plan that was going to be associated with that. I'm very pleased to report to the council that that plan is working very, very well. And I anticipate that that 3-year plan is going to be accelerated. More than likely, you will see me coming back to you with the next step of that plan and a possible budget amendment associated with it during this particular fiscal year as opposed to the end of this fiscal year. And that concludes the section for compensation, benefits, and staffing. Does the council have any questions so far? Great.
Jim, I had a question about the 1.5%. Having heard a lot of reports recently that salaries are going up in other areas, particularly the private sector, on an average of 3 to 5%. Have we considered or have you looked at anything higher than the 1.5?
Thank you, sir. Good segue. We actually, each year, I use, for the Kansas City area from May to May, the Mountain Plains Information Office, for the Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas Metropolitan Data Table, for May of 2017 through May of 2018, the basket of goods for employees who are not farmers, went from 1076.8 to 1093.5, which was a 1.5% increase, sir.
That's what you based your
Yes, sir.
projection off of. Okay.
Any other questions on that section? Great. Some departmental notes relative to expenses. Buildings and grounds is the fiscal year 19 budget for this department is proposed to increase from fiscal year 2018 by $63,259. That's a 20% increase. It's over a 20% increase. Primary reasons for that are we have seen a very large rise in electrical costs and natural gas costs associated with buildings and grounds, so much so that we are actually looking at the possibility of bringing, instead of purchasing propane, bringing a natural gas line over to Public Works from the Raymore Activity Center and from Parks Maintenance. We think that even with the laying of the line in the long term, the savings that would be realized by actually using the natural gas as opposed to the propane, we need to find a solution to that because they're just going up. A minor one also is that portion of the assistant building technician that will be coming out of the buildings and grounds portion on this. Municipal court, there's a decrease of $46,648. That's slightly over 27% in the municipal court department. Obviously, most of that is associated with moving the position from full-time to half-time. Streets, the streets budget is realizing a decrease of 5.42% or $49,512. I put these in here, and I know intuitively the council knows why some of these decreases occurred. In last year's budget, after the budget was presented, the council said out of fund balance, let's buy a pickup truck or let's buy, so that goes into last year's. Obviously those one-time purchases come off of this year's and lead to decreases in departments, and you see the description for that in this particular one. Same thing with economic development, down 37,452, a 16.7% decrease. And then last but not least, and I actually listed this one last because I want to talk to you about the fact that we are changing as Mr. Carteret has been supervising economic development and this is a multi-year process. We are going to be transitioning that look as a whole from community development, economic development, to development services. I feel it's a better descriptor. Very glad Mr. Carteret came to us with kind of a full-scale proposal to lead in that direction. But for right now, development services, which was community development, again, a decrease of $33,131, primarily associated with last year we had a one-time purchase of Esri software within that department. You see listed within the fiscal year, the last paragraph for the departmental budgets, administration, engineering, stormwater, buildings and grounds, the prosecuting attorney's office, police, and emergency management are all increasing, but just slightly. The fiscal year 2019 department budgets for information technology, finance, and communications are all decreasing just slightly, not a material amount in any of those particular departments. Any questions on expenses? With all of that being said, and I know everybody goes to this number, after all of the foregoing, it is projected that the general fund ending fund balance for fiscal year 2019 will be a total of $3,181,224. After reserving an amount equivalent to 20% of operating expenditures, which equates to $1,945,572, which is city policy, a net unrestricted and available fund balance of $1,235,653 is projected at the end of fiscal year 2019. This amount is available for additional use as the council directs. After I have concluded the operational and the capital funds, I'll be returning in a giant loop to talk about that particular paragraph with the council again. If there are no questions on the general fund, I'll move to the park fund. Very good. Revenue sources in the park fund, they begin to change from our traditional one-third, one-third, one-third as we see buildings coming online. The park levy will be generating approximately 29% of the fiscal year 2019 revenues. The park levy, as the council knows, is remaining at the 12.06 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, which means that 9.38 of every dollar of property tax that is paid, 9.38% of that goes to park fund operations. That the amount that is being budgeted, again, $402,780, represents 29% of the overall revenue budget for the park fund. Second source of revenue for the park fund is program revenue. This amount has increased from the traditional one-third by 5% to 38%. Total budget of $532,025. This amount of revenue is almost entirely associated with the additional programs that we're going to be able to do because the RAC is coming online. Again, that's the additional ones. As you look into the budget detail, you will note that Centerview this year and the Activity Center this year are broken out to show program expenses and program revenues only. No personnel associated with either of those yet. As we get into it, what we want to be able to see is, with the limited amount of costs directly associated with the program, spooky, costs directly, would you like a Cheez-It, sir? Costs directly associated with the program and revenues directly associated with with those particular programs. For the time being, we want to see how much we're realizing return on those expenses. We may in the future be recommending back to the council that those particular facilities be folded back into recreation and parks, because facilities aren't really departments. in and of themselves. So a better budget presentation may lend itself to this, but in the near term, so we can all be tracking that, I think it's a valuable piece of information to have them busted out in the near term. Park Sales Tax Fund Program. Fund transfer. Again, in fiscal year 2019, it is budgeted to transfer $350,000 from the Park Sales Tax Fund to the Park Fund. Also within the revenues is the transfers from the general fund. Again, this was the paragraph that got transposed with the expenditures to the right of it. Once again, in 2019, I am recommending to the City Council that the Parks budget include a general fund transfer in the amount of $100,000. Has been consistent with past years in support of the programs that they are offering to the city. Any questions on Park Fund revenues? Fantastic. Expenditures in the Parks and Recreation Fund are budgeted to increase from the fiscal year 28 budget amount by $79,223. Primary additions to the expenses within this fund are the Activity Center coming online, as well as the additional 1/2 FTE building technician being proposed. Expansion items that were included in the Park Fund was only the assistant building technician being requested. There were no other expansion items. I can also say the same thing for the general fund. The only expansion items that were requested were the assistant building technician, and there were no others proposed for the general fund. Any questions on Parks and Recreation? I would add that the Parks and Recreation Board has seen both the operating fund, the capital sales tax fund, and the CIP items that are being proposed to the council. They are, as any other year, as long as I receive a balanced budget from the Parks Board, I pass it on to you with no changes being made. The Enterprise Fund. A reminder to the council that the entirety of the Enterprise Fund, water, sewer, and solid waste, recycling, yard waste services, is a pure cost of service model. We try to get to a point where it is, even on the water and sewer, as much as possible, while keeping fund balance healthy, it's a pass-through of the amount that the city is realizing as far as cost is concerned. If it's possible to lower it, as we are doing in the blended fund this year, we do that to maintain pure cost of service. The fiscal year 2019 water and sewer use charges do reflect an increase in water rates of 5%, but a decrease in sewer rates of 10 cents, and for a net decrease in the total rate of 5 cents. The Water Division long-term expense in the amount of $80,000 for continued conversion of water meters will be eliminated this year with the action of the council and second reading coming up next week to make the purchase of an entire water meter system. So the operating fund is actually relieved, similar to the street light program. We relieve the operating fund of the water sewer fund of $80,000 in operating expense. That expense goes to debt service payments within one of the capital funds. The cost to purchase water from Kansas City, obviously the highest of the costs and expenses associated with the water portion of the fund, in 2019 is budgeted at $1,922,160. Kansas City Water Services is bound and determined, in my mind, to hit the watershed mark of $2 million by next year. I work on these hard. The cost of treatment of the sewer by Little Blue Valley Sewer District. Remember, the sewer expenses are divided into Little Blue Valley as well as Middle Big Creek. The budgeted amount for Little Blue Valley in fiscal year 2019 is $1,264,580. The cost of treatment by Middle Big Creek will remain at $32.50 per connection. The total cost for Middle Big Creek will be $684,840 budgeted in fiscal year 2019.
Jim, I've always had this question, sitting on both of those boards, never really gotten an actual percentage of how many of our users are in, what percentage are in Little Blue and how many are in Middle Big Creek, because Middle Big Creek, well, if you follow the ridge line out to the east, is those on the other side of the ridge line are in Middle Big Creek. But what percentage of our users are those, do you recall?
Cindy, do you recall what our, because we built 3250 a connection, how many connections we have on there?
I would hate to say off the top of my head. I have it in my office, but
We'll get back to you on that.
Well,
We'll
I've
let you know.
actually asked them to provide that, the Little Blue Valley Sewer District, to provide how many are actually in the Middle Big Creek district for all of the entities that are represented, Winnebago,
Oh, okay.
Lee Summit, Pleasant Hill.
We'll
the
certainly
county.
get ours out to you, though.
Okay.
Yeah, the way Middle Big Creek works is they bill us the $32.50 a connection each month. And if we build in Middle Big Creek, which doesn't happen very often right now, then we let them know we built a home in there, and they increase, obviously, the X number of homes times the $32.50, and we pay them then.
And to let you all know that there is a project that is being considered out in Pleasant Hill that's a fairly large project. Would only be one connection, but there'd be a lot of water running through that. And so they're trying to restructure their fee basis based upon when you get outside a certain size, the number of gallons that are used by that particular site. So while it's been fairly small and mostly residential, we are going to have to, from the Middle Big Creek perspective, have to come up with another way of budgeting for those larger projects that we just, my home and a 150,000 square foot facility are $32.50 each. It's just not right that be charged that. So they're trying to come up with a way to adequately come up with a good cost on that, but they haven't figured it out yet. I don't know if we've got anything going on out. We probably don't have anything planned for the future out that way other than residents from time to time.
Right, we see very few connections.
Yeah.
The solid waste component of the enterprise fund is something I'd like to talk with you about. We have in here, beginning in January 2019, I have proposed to the council that the cost for this service be increased from $12.41 to $12.78. Have a really long paragraph here, but I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version of what is occurring on this. By the contract, Jim's Disposal has to come into us prior to July 1 of each year if they have an intention of increasing or possibly decreasing the monthly household rate that is going to take place. This year they did come in. They came in on June 29th at 4:45 and delivered to us and they used the actual from the contract. There's what is called a refuse rate increase or index that is placed into the contract that they have to use. The index has categories of costs that are realized by refuse providers throughout the United States. Those particular categories that are within it are labor, fuel, vehicle replacement, vehicle maintenance, and all other. And then based on national average and a static number, each of those is given a weight. As an example, the weight, the weight is how much of their overall costs that particular item is on a national average. As an example, fuel gets a particular percentage weight associated with it. Nationwide, this is what they can be expected to pay as 100% compared to 100%. And when you add up all those weights, it equals 100% of their costs. Then you have the actual place in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the table that you can find what has occurred. Then you have the change, just like we apply May to May for labor. In this area, they apply May to May for their change in their area. They actually are permitted to use each month. So they can go January to January, February to February. So if a huge spike has been realized within there, they can still absorb those costs that were associated with it. And you're not just looking at a static date. When they first turned it into us, it was, they had entered the correct Bureau of Labor Statistic column numbers, but they had also changed the weighted numbers. As an example, if fuel in that particular year went up by an enormous amount, they moved from, say, a 5.75 fuel amount to a 12% fuel amount. Well, the mathematics of that is obvious. It's a double hit for us when they do it. They have the weight, they don't change the weight and account for that increase in both of those categories. Based on what they first turned into us, they were proposing a 4.525% increase. So we worked through the month of July to get a meeting set up with them. The meeting took place a couple of weeks ago, actually about a week and a half ago, finally. Mr. Churchbird was not in attendance, but in the meeting was his consultant. And we came to a meeting of the minds on how these numbers should be applied. And I believe the percentage increase that we all agreed on in the room with his consultant was 2.993. That would reflect the 12.78 that you see here in the budget, a 2.993 increase. On the Friday, 2 Fridays ago, I emailed, the meeting was on Thursday, I emailed Mr. Bird on the Friday to say, everybody in the room, both of your consultants and us, we believe that this 2.993 should be the number. Here's how we arrived at it. Here's the sheet. Please acknowledge. He wrote me back on Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, and said, we will resend. I don't know what that means. If he rescinds at the 4.5, then we're right back to the drawing board, but we have everybody else in this picture agreeing to 2.993. So it needs to be 2.993, and it will be 2.993. But I just wanted to explain that because you may be hearing about it. Any questions on that particular lengthy item? Yes.
So just check for understanding. So when we do the contract with our solid waste provider, we're basically locking them in for the term of the contract. And this particular mechanism is much like us in selling water. This is a way for them to recoup. It's not an increase in their profits per se. This is a way for them to recoup the cost of doing business, if you will. Is
exactly.
that correct?
It maintains the cost of service model that we use for the entire enterprise fund.
Okay.
This is the cost of providing the service. And they have to prove that up. And they have to prove it up each year of the contract. They can't wait.
Thank you.
Still in the enterprise fund, transfers out. Again, the $829,280 that I discussed earlier into the general fund. And then the enterprise capital and maintenance fund is funded out of the enterprise fund because it's for ongoing operations that are necessary. We try to contribute approximately 1% of the overall infrastructure value that would need to be replaced in any given year based on a 100-year service life for items. So that transfer is $600,000 based on that this year. The enterprise fund also makes an annual transfer to the restricted revenue fund, has been, for litigation costs associated with Water District 10. As it is imminent that that settlement agreement is going to be reached in the next several weeks, that has been removed from as a transfer in this particular fiscal year. The expansion item that is being proposed to be funded in this one no longer works. So we probably better get one so we can continue to make water taps in the amount of $7,500. You're going to hear a lot about within my discussion with you all about a maintenance budget need and a maintenance budget want, the need portion gets really trimmed down, and wants gets expanded when you're talking about a maintenance budget like what we have for this particular year. Any questions in the enterprise fund? Debt service fund. The fiscal year 2019 total debt service payment schedule is scheduled to be $3,543,002 with 10 issues outstanding. The total debt of the city is currently $33,416,000. The 10 outstanding issues are a Series 2017 new money issue, which is what we're operating on now with what we did on 58 and all the work that's currently taking place. A portion of that was, you'll remember, to keep bank qualified. We did a small portion of it in 2016, and then in January of 2017 rolled it over. So a Series 2016. A Series 2013 refunding of Series 2007, a Series 2012 refunding of portions of Series 2004 and 2007, a Series 2008 refunding of a portion of Series 1999A, Series 1999B State Revolving Fund. In revenue, those are the GO bonds associated with it. Then there are 4 revenue bonds, along with those 6 GO bonds, a Series 2016 new money, a Series 2009 Hubach Hill North Cass Parkway, which we are to be paid back for once things start happening down there, a Series 2006 refunding of Series 2016, and a Series 1998, which was new money. After approval at a second reading, there will be an 11th issue, Series 2018, which is associated with the purchase of the new meter system. We do not include it in the budget until it's actually realized. So when we realize that, because it is technically a revenue, although it's also an expense within the debt service, it will actually be inserted before you all get your final budget at that time. If I could ask you to all turn to page 220 under the debt service section. What this shows you is, in essence, how much we can go into debt. And there are 2 forms of legal debt limit. General margin is, they're both based on our total assessed valuation in any given year. General margin is 10% of the assessed valuation and can be used for any general obligation issue. Specific margin is 10% of that same assessed valuation, but it can only be used for acquiring right-of-way, extending and improving streets, avenues, or sanitary and storm systems. So it's much more limited in things that can be done. An example, specific debt cannot be used for the types of parks improvements that we did. You can't build a rack with it. You can't build an amphitheater with it. As you can see from this chart, we are in a very, very healthy debt limit situation. A number of our surrounding cities you hear about all the time, they have maximized this amount. Specifically in 2018, we have a general margin amount that we could draw on of $33,475,459. We have $9,961,422. Specific debt, that same amount, $33,475,459. We are at $12,688,578. Just wanted to point that out. It is a very healthy debt margin situation, and in fact is mentioned each year in our Moody's report. The Internal Services Fund, back to page 31. The Internal Services Funds for the city, the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund. Within the police department, we are proposing 3 patrol vehicles be purchased this year. The street department, 1 stainless steel salt spreader. Park department, 1 tiller. I do not understand how we managed to get the UTV not in the VERT fund, which would also be my proposal to the council when we buy that new UTV that we're proposing for the police department, if the council approves that, I'll be getting that at the end of this, somehow escaped the VERT fund, but we've got a tiller in for the Parks and Recreation Department. I would also let the council know that due to continued excellent trade market for the vehicles that we're turning in and the maintenance that we do on them, this particular budget for all but our police patrol vehicles, and I've talked with all the department heads about this, for all of our vehicles, fleet vehicles, with the exception of the patrol vehicles, I am proposing that the service life for those be extended out 1 year. The patrol vehicles, that's not a possibility, but everywhere else we can bear that and get a little bit of cost savings rather than possibly turning away a vehicle for a trade-in value that is, while good, might be the same 1 year later, and and with low maintenance costs associated within that 1 year. In the restricted revenue fund, it's used to account for and restrict the funds the city receives for a variety of purposes. You can see the activity that's associated with that, with the restricted revenue fund for the upcoming year. It's quite minimal for this particular year. The restricted revenue fund tends to see a little bit more action after the council has had the opportunity to discuss available fund balance. That is one of the primary funds where we place any funds that you are looking for specific targeted projects. That concludes the presentation within the general fund, unless the council has any questions.
On the 10 issues in the debt service, are any of those near retirement?
Yes, several of them, sir. A couple of them, sir. Are actually, in fact, I think one has 2 more years of payment on it, Cindy? I believe the 1999.
That's what I was figuring. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you can see those on 219 with the detail right behind them as far as when they're going to be coming off the rolls. And it gives the entire life of that particular bond issue. Mm-hmm. That concludes the operating fund portion, sir. Do you want me to press on, or do you want to take a 5-minute break?
I don't know. Everybody good to go? Keep going? That's fine.
I will press on to page 257 of the capital budget. As in the last 2 years, I don't do a lot of detail within the detail here because I know the council wants to get to the projects and the project discussion. So just a very, very brief overview. There are 3 primary sources of revenue within the capital funds on page 260. There's the sales tax, there's building fees and permits, and there are transfers from other funds. Within the sales taxes, the sales tax actually funds to a 5-cent level or a 0.5% level. The transportation fund, a 0.5% level in the capital improvement fund, and a 0.5% in the stormwater and park sales tax funds. Within the stormwater and the park sales tax funds, the council will remember 40% of that 0.5 cent goes to parks sales tax, 40% of that 0.5 cent goes to stormwater sales tax, 20% is at the council's discretion. For the last many, many years, the city council has said, split that 20% 10 and 10. This particular budget within the revenues for both of those particular sales tax funds does split it to the the 50/50 for a 50% funding level in total of that half cent in both of those funds. Building fees and permits, the park fee and lieu fund is funded out of this. The excise tax fund is funded out of building fees and permits. Water connection fee is funded out of the fees, and the sewer connection fee is funded out of the fees. Again, those are impacted by going from 175 starts to 125 starts for our residential homes. The last one is transfers from other funds. The two funds that are funded up with transfers are the Building and Equipment Replacement Fund and the Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund. The Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund, Fund 54, is actually funded out of Fund 50, and Fund 05 actually receives a set amount, a transfer of $100,000 each year from the Capital Improvement Fund to fund that particular capital fund up. Again, this year, we have the proposed 2019 capital budget includes 24 recommended projects on the whole for the year at this time. Of those, $141,400 is funded out of buildings and grounds. $373,725 is funded out of parks. $1,344,775 is funded out of sanitary sewer. $345,000 is funded out of stormwater. $1,580,000 out of transportation. $165,000 out of water, for a total project amount as stated of $3,949,200. Yes, sir.
On the third line, did you say 1,344,000?
Yes, sir.
075? I'm showing 31 million.
Yeah,
This is it? Okay, thank you.
yeah, I hit the dollar sign at the top, and I also hit the 3 at about the same time. And to proceed in the capital funds, as the council is aware, the fiscal year 2019 capital fund budget is actually the first year of the 5-year CIP. So if I could ask the council to actually turn to the CIP portion at the back of your budget, it might be a little bit easier to proceed, and we can go into the project detail by actually looking at the CIP sheets. And that would be immediately behind the CIP tab at the very back of your budget book. You actually see my message. So, and what I have done for my cheat sheet is I have taken this sheet from the capital funds portion, and I'll be walking you through each of the categories in turn, and giving you the page numbers within the CIP so that we can talk about it. The first item under the category within the CIP of buildings and grounds, which is the first group of sheets that you will hit in the detail, if I could ask you to turn your attention to page 18 of the CIP. Pages 18 and 22 of the CIP are door access systems. It involves installing a new door access system, which is not there currently on the park's maintenance facility, and installing a new updated building access system. This is the card systems here at City Hall and at the Public Works building. Both of those buildings have existing card systems. The purpose of all of this being to bring all of the card systems within the city into the same group of technology. My card works at the Activity Center, it works here at City Hall, it works at Public Works, as do you all's. And it was the one here at City Hall is beginning to show some signs. Remember, I talked about the 3 on my telephone when we approved the card access system. For some reason, each time I'm trying to go into the administration side, delays for about 3 seconds, and I always end up smashing into the door. I don't know what's going on there. It's a sign.
That's by design.
Those guys 3 seconds to get back to work.
You hear the snickering
And everybody
behind me.
behind you's laughing.
There have been times they've deliberately shut me out, so that on page 20 of the CIP, you see the municipal circle light replacement. The city council will remember a couple of years ago, we undertook to replace all of the parking lot lights because they were deteriorating. We were starting to get worried about them rusting through, falling over. The electrical systems on some of them had gone bad. So we're proposing now that on Broadmoor and Skyline, the replacement of 8 lights associated with that same deterioration. We're now to that point. We've got all the lighting done here on the circle. And then the last item under the buildings and grounds section on page 24 is the City Hall exterior painting. City Hall is, the stucco components of City Hall and the guttering and the flashing have never been updated or painted or spruced up since we got into this building. They are starting to show signs of age, a lot of mold growth on them that needs to get taken care of. So we are proposing $47,000 within the buildings and grounds component of this for the City Hall exterior painting. That brings the total amount for buildings and grounds projects to $141,400. The next section is the park section. There are a number of projects in here. I'm going to be bouncing around pages. The reason I bounce pages is because as they were presented to me by the CIP, I would approve or disapprove them. You're also going to see some projects that are not for the capital budget within the park section because they're being funded in 20 or 21 or 22 or an out year, but they are funded within the park sales tax, so they're included in the funded section of the CIP, but they're not a portion of next year's capital budget. I'll only be going through the ones that are actually in the fiscal year 2019 capital budget. First item on page 40 and page 42 of the CIP are the Hawkridge Park security cameras and the TB Hanna Park security cameras. Very necessary as we continue to move forward. This is to match the camera system and the technology that we're currently putting into Recreation Park to keep those upgraded areas safe and secure. Next item within parks on page 44 is the projector and screen for the Raymore Activity Center. This year's budget, to stay balanced, we couldn't bear that within the GEO bond fund, so we knew we already had it in as an amenity to go into that particular location. It would be one of those, if approved by the City Council, would probably be one of the first items purchased after November 1, so that we get that in and up and running in the winter. On page 32, Memorial Park playground improvements. The playground that is just north of the West Shelter at Memorial Park is in very bad and deteriorating condition, needs to be upgraded. An amount of $48,000 has been recommended. All of these amounts have been trued up. This year, the CIP committee did a fantastic job of not only presenting me with the projects, but presenting me with, especially in a challenging construction year, with a lot of data and documentation and backup associated with the costs that you see here. Recreation Park ball field lights on page 34 of the CIP. This calls for the two of the smaller fields, fields number 1 and 2 at Recreation Park, to receive the same lighting so that we can have the smaller groups out there playing. I was actually talking with a management team the other day. Both of my grandchildren, as a matter of fact, had that practice cut short because of darkness on those 2 fields. So this will allow for not only games but practices to go longer on those particular 2 fields. On page 54 For those of you who use Recreation Park or noticed it at the ribbon cutting for the Activity Center, the Recreation Park pond is in a lot of need of maintenance. It is an expensive project, but a very necessary project in the amount of $150,000 on page 54 of the CIP. Memorial Park Arboretum light replacement, page 38, in the amount of $26,000 is another enhancement to the Arboretum and the other enhancements that we've been doing at Memorial Park. The lighting needs to be upgraded and replaced. That makes total projects within the parks section of $373,725. Just a reminder, because they're in the CIP section, when you look at each of those particular projects, you will notice that they not only have an expenditure amount, but a funding source amount associated with them. The funding source, just because it is in parks, the funding source is not necessarily out of park sales tax or the park fund itself. An example is the security cameras that you see on there. Those are actually being funded up out of the capital improvement fund of the city. Next section is the sanitary sewer. Sanitary sewer on page 80, first item is the Herald Estates sanitary sewer extension that we've had a lot of conversation about, $500,000 for that particular extension. Sanitary sewer, and Mr. Crass is in hopes this will be a major design project that we're actually going to try to undertake internally. We think we have the ability to do that. The sanitary sewer inflow and infiltration reduction project, I've described this for the last couple of years and continue to describe this as not a wow item, but it sure has saved us a lot of, and our citizens, a lot of money. It has been wildly successful and has dramatically decreased the amount of sanitary sewer that actually enters homes during a major rain event. Owen Good force main repairs, you'll remember that. Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question, when we are doing things like this to save money there, it's lowering the cost of services. So that's one of the ways that the people are saving the money that way. When we don't pay for sewer treatment of rainwater, right?
Exactly, sir. As well as direct costs. A lot of times these sewer systems back up, and while it's our fault if it's an I&I issue, not all that gets picked up, and there's no accounting for the hardship and the grief that some of those folks go through when they walk down in their basement, or when they used to walk down in their basement and there was 6 inches of untreated sewer water sitting in there. I mean, that's not something that you can always put a dollar amount on, and it's just been dramatically reduced. Owen Good force main repairs, you may remember that several months ago the council approved for the consultant to come back in and look at the force main repairs that were going to be necessary on the north side of Mazuma to that force main that we had already done the emergency repairs to on the south side. These repairs were directly attributable to the buildup of gases and the type of soil that we laid that pipe in, same as the problem we had down south, but now we can plan for it. Hefty dollar amount in the amount of $700,000 associated with the repairs that are going to be necessary on the north side of 58 Highway. Evanbrook sewer repair. This one actually is not within the city limits, but it's our responsibility. The line that serves Evanbrook and cuts up through there, if you go down into Dutchman Acres, one of the northern properties on Dutchman Acres, that sewer pipe, because of erosion in the stream down there, is actually exposed. It sets above the water line within the creek bed there. We need to get down there and replace that out. $18,000 is the estimate on that. Total sanitary sewer projects of $1,344,075. Annual curb Sorry about that. Stormwater. Just one second. On page 86, you see annual curb replacement. This is one of the ones that I would like to talk to you all about. I believe that this is the portion that you'll remember I spoke with the council about. And several years ago, we increased within street preservation, or within the streets department, transportation department, and the transportation fund, we increased curb replacement to $400,000. At the same time, we recognize that curbs are also part of the stormwater conveyance system of the city, and the council was good enough to approve $100,000 out of that, so that each year since then, we've been doing $500,000 worth of curb replacement. I am requesting that the council consider, at least for the next 5-year period, that the stormwater conveyance system portion of that be considered, and we increase that $100,000 to $200,000 for curb replacement throughout the city, and begin accelerating that particular schedule. Page 86 of the CIP. Culvert replacement, page 88 of the CIP, in the amount of $35,000. And we need a new storm sanitary sewer camera. While not a project, it is what generates projects, similar to having the consultant come in and pay them. On page 90 of the CIP, $110,000 split between 2 different funds. Transportation projects proposed for fiscal year 2019.
Before we go on to that, Jim, I'd like to open it up for, is there any input on Jim's 5-year plan on curb replacement? I know members, some of the more senior members here on the group sat through conversations regarding the curb replacement program. So is there any input on this? Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, City Manager Feuerborn. I support the increase of the 100,000, but I would also increase even a greater amount too if we don't run into a lot of expenditures that council wants for other things of the unrestricted. I'll hold my comments to that, but I absolutely appreciate staff's input on that, but I'm still open for more there, so thank you.
Okay.
You make it your wish.
Do you have anything? Sonia?
I would just add that I agree, we have a need. We have lots of crumbling curbs, and that's probably one of the biggest complaints I get is condition of curbs. It's mostly, feels like lots of times just an appearance thing, but it does really affect the stormwater and has bigger concerns than just appearance, but most people are concerned about appearance.
And the way we're doing it now too with the block curbs and the smoother cutout for the drives, I think is going over pretty well with the folks. It's got a nice look to it, nice clean look to it. Yep.
With putting that money at an accelerated rate, will that hope to have an additional cost savings? Because the costs 5 years from now are going to be higher. So to get it done in the next 4 years instead of the next 5.
Net present value is always going to come in. We have seen the construction cost index going up. So yes, it'll help.
Yep, Mr. Ullman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Feuerborn, do we have a time? I know in the capital improvements plan it goes out at least 5 years. Do we have an estimate when we will move away from replacement to more of a maintenance mode where we won't need quite this much critical infrastructure investment?
Honestly, no, sir.
It's going to stay the same, basically, going forward.
It was so bad for so long, and we were using incorrect materials for so long, through no fault of our own. I mean,
right.
The limestone had just degraded to that extent in this area before we caught it. And Mike talks about, there were national conventions associated with just looking at what the heck's going on with curbs.
Okay, thank you.
It's going, no matter what, it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be making a proposal to you all in just a second that will help, I hope.
So moving right along.
Within the transportation fund, the annual curb replacement, again, at 400,000. So at this point in this particular reading tonight, we're at 600,000, over $500,000 in curb replacement each year. Annual street preservation, again, funded and funded out for the full 5 years at 800,000 on page 98. And then I'd like to make a proposal to the council that is different than in past years on page 100. The council will remember that several years ago, you placed into the restricted revenue fund an amount to replace sidewalk gaps. And we have been following that every single year, and there was 150,000 placed in there for every year. That program ending with the identified sidewalk gaps from 5 years ago with a $75,000 in last year's budget. It showed for this year $75,000 in the last of those 5 years to address the sidewalk gaps. I am requesting that the council consider changing the title of that to right-of-way infrastructure repairs, and that we spend the last 75 on the sidewalk gap, and then we are seeing an increase, a slight increase in sidewalk repairs that need to be done. Not in every year, because sidewalks, it's a different piece of flat work. You don't see it as much as curbs, but you do see it. And that for now and the foreseeable future, at least for a 5-year period, we budget $150,000. No sidewalk repairs, the entire $150,000 rolls over into additional curb repair money, so that we now have $750,000 a year being done in curb repair. Sidewalk repairs, as they're necessary, gets plugged in, and we program those out to the city council. The difference in this particular line item from, let's say, the formalized curb replacement program and the formalized street preservation program is we're identifying them as we go. It won't be as easy to give you the schedule. It will be on the call-in basis. Oh my gosh, my curb is given out. Sometimes we see it deteriorate in as quickly as 2 months. Oh my gosh, this sidewalk just now sunk and it cracked, so the mud jacking program won't work on it. We got to get out there and do it. These funds would be dedicated to that. Sidewalk first, but again, we don't always have as much of that as we do of the curb. The rest of it would roll over into additional curb replacement. If we didn't have any identified curb replacement on that as-needed basis, we would accelerate then the next year's curb replacement into the current year and use the per unit bid price to get the additional curbs off the schedule.
If I could, hold on a second. Mr. Douglas.
Quick question related to Ward 4 specifically. I know one of the sidewalk projects that we've kind of been putting off is Sandpiper, because it's going to be a more extensive project. Does that keep that on the table or take that off the table?
Mike, when is Sandpiper? I know we talked about this. Sandpiper is scheduled, isn't it?
Yes, I think the intent here, Mr. Fearborn, is after this kind of kicks in after we get done with the sidewalk program, and we have Sandpiper and Huron, and I believe one more small segment within the urban area. But Ms. Abdelgawad is correct. There are some challenges with sidewalks on those because they're more of a rural section, and we're looking at options to see what we can do to there.
Okay. I knew that it was kind of optionally part of the sidewalk program because of the challenges out there. I think that's probably something Mr. Behrens and I need to talk to people in that neighborhood about and kind of see how they're feeling. But I was just curious if that was just completely taking it off the table or not.
No.
Thank you.
No, it's still in the program, ma'am.
Yeah, it was part of that, the original 75 that was going to be used. The problem in this particular year is, as Mr. Krass indicated, it has challenges, as we've all said, that might bump that price a little bit.
Couple of other questions. I had one about the culvert repairs. Are you talking about just the curb cuts where the drains are, or are we talking about maybe old town or original town type culvert issues that occur because there's just a storm ditch through there, and I didn't know if we had any actual hardened material in any of those areas to help with the flow?
Mr. Krass?
What this would be used for is towards the end of the year, this time of year, when we're starting to do some of our maintenance, we're starting to encounter culvert failures, some of which need to be repaired immediately that exceed what we have in the operations budget. Our hope with the sewer camera, and we've already kind of cataloged things because there's a large group of street crossings that are starting to age at the same time, is that we can get ahead of it and start planning for it instead of being more proactive instead of being reactive. But this is just similar to the sidewalk repairs or curb repairs. These are if we come across a failed culvert where we've got a road failure, it allows us to fund that and repair it immediately.
Okay. Mr. Townsend, did you have a question?
It's probably similar to Councilmember Delguad's. This right-of-way infrastructure repairs, would this accommodate or consider the timber trail development with regard to the east side of Dean from Lucy Webb to the now Johnston Drive, filling in that sidewalk so that it completes the loop through the trail and up through Raymore Galleria?
That one's actually getting closer and closer, but the developer has to put that particular segment of sidewalk.
That's the developer? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. Next item under transportation is the maintenance of thoroughfare routes. The council 3 years ago gave us the go-ahead to use excise tax funding for major thoroughfare routes. This calls for the continuation of that particular funding in the amount of $200,000 to relieve the transportation fund itself, and it bumps up the actual amount of street pres, if you will, that we're doing in any given year to exactly $1 million. The Shadowwood settlement investigation, which sounds very mysterious, on page 104. There are a number of areas in the Shadowwood settlement division that are experiencing failures and settlements both in public infrastructure areas and private infrastructure areas, a number of areas where sidewalks have dropped considerably to where a gap doesn't even work. You see it in the private driveway areas of that. We need to get a handle on what is happening there so we can be making proposals to the council on how to remedy this, both for public and for private, and get with those folks and let them know what's going on. And it's a number of areas in Shadowwood. Underwater, hydrant replacement. We have a number of, each year we inspect a quarter of the fire hydrants within the city. This is on page 112. A number of those hydrants have been found to have outlived their...
Can you talk about that just a little bit? There's 100,000.
That's in a future year, sir. Yeah. Again, hydrant replacement on page 112. For $112,000, a number of our fire hydrants in the quarter-year survey have outlived their useful life. We need to replace them to make sure that they don't entirely fail, in which case we would have a problem on our hands if there was ever something where they were needed. Star Drive water main replacement. This is a continuation of the project that we started in this particular year down on Star Drive in the amount of $53,000 on page 114. That brings the grand total of the fiscal year 2019 capital projects to $3,949,200. Any questions on any of those capital projects? As a last item within this particular section of the budget presentation, it may come as soon as this year. We may have to plug it in one of the upcoming work sessions with the council relative to next year. We are realizing some challenges associated with Creekmore Elementary School, the extension of bus service from a half a mile out to a mile, and the fact that there is no sidewalk on the east side of Fox Ridge Drive. up there to the north. Specifically, the last street before you get to 155th Street, if you're driving north on Fox Ridge Drive, is Drake. You may remember that we have a grant that we have received to put sidewalk in from Drake to Creekmore Drive. Creekmore Drive is the only, between 155th Street and all the way down to 58 Highway, Creekmore Drive is the only stop sign on that particular section of Fox Ridge. Therefore, it is the only controlled intersection. We are getting requests from the school district and parents up there on the north side that we paint a crosswalk at Drake going across Fox Ridge. That would be bad on a number of levels. It would give a false sense of security to anybody using the crosswalk. If you can visualize it, 163rd Street, when we took the stop signs out of there, we actually put in yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk, and time and again, when I'm out either running or walking or with the grandchildren, people blow right through that sign while people are in that crosswalk, because it is not a controlled intersection of any kind on the Fox Ridge side of it. The grant doesn't go into effect until 2021. The grant is, however, can be accelerated, meaning we could pay for that. It's about $180,000 total. Is that correct, Mr. Krass?
Yes, sir.
Of which a portion of it's our match. But we could accelerate it, pay for it, and then the portion that they would need to pay back, when it comes to that funding year cycle, we could get them down to Creekmore Drive where they need to be and put the crosswalk there at a four-way intersection. It's four-way stop sign with a controlled intersection. We're exploring that. We're exploring options with the school district. We're trying to get the final engineering down for it, but it will be an item either soon this year or within next year's proposed budget to get with the council about to get that particular problem taken care of. I don't want to shoot from the hip on it and propose something to the city council that wouldn't be the long-term solution that you're looking for, or that the school district is looking for that matter.
Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I recall the last meeting, Mr. Feuerborn gave us a heads up. The planning and zoning is going to be taking on a upcoming topic that deals with widths of sidewalks. With this discussion tonight, I'm kind of curious if we are talking about putting sidewalks in there, which they're needed, but will they be done to any proposed changes that the planning and zoning is going to be bringing forth? I suspect, and I don't know, but I suspect that any changes they're going to come forth with will probably deal with wider sidewalks. The last thing that I want to see us do is go in there with basically a 4-foot sidewalk. Walking as much as I have, the sidewalk beside the elementary school by my house down in Eagle Glen, if you ask me, it's just too narrow. You know, I would support, you know, a sidewalk that is probably 5 foot to 6 foot wide, especially in a school area. But the normal 4-foot sidewalk, I think, is just too narrow, my opinion.
Mr. Carteret.
Yes, sir. The proposal in front of the Planning Commission is really on residential streets. So it's currently 4 foot. There is talk of making that 5 foot. Along collector and arterials, it is a 5 foot standard. So that would be a minimum width. Along Fox Ridge would be 5 foot.
Yeah, so it's already a 5 foot standard on those. I think they're just taking up the residential. Is that right, Jim?
That's correct.
Residential width.
Residential streets is currently 4. Collectors, arterials 5.
That concludes the budget presentation on the capital funds. As a general overview, I would remind the council that there are 2 work sessions prior to the first reading of the budget. September 17th and October 1. Obviously, the budget will be on both of those. If at any given time the council has any questions about the budget, any questions about the detail of the budget, any one of the staff and myself are available at your convenience to discuss those. Now, as I had indicated, I'd kind of like to loop back around, if you don't have any questions on anything so far, and talk to you about that last paragraph in my first transmittal detail. And that is the paragraph on the available fund balance. The available fund balance currently projected at the end of fiscal year 19 is $1,235,653. Staff had a lot of discussions about that this year, and we certainly don't want to be overstepping or giving an impression of trying to stifle creative thought. But a lot of times a lot of times the proposals for available fund balance get generated here at the table, and it's you all kindly asking us, what do you need? What do you need to do your job better? So this year I thought, let's be a little bit proactive on that particular question. So we do have some thoughts for you all. If you could pass that one around. These are for them. You guys got yours? I'll just wait till this gets around. Perfect. If I could just run down this list very quickly. A lot of these are, and you see in the final column, relative to my discussion on maintenance years, need items that are going to be imminent for us, and nice items, and that would be our kind of our starting point with y'all. First item is a replacement UTV all-terrain vehicle to replace the one that is currently on its last legs that we bought several years ago. I would add that just like our capital project funds, these particular, the funding amounts that you see here are conservative. They are thought out, they had to be documented, and they are high. Celebrite Universal Forensic Extraction Device. This is so that we can do root canals here at City Hall.
Not that kind of extraction.
Anything you need.
That item, Chief, why don't you go ahead and describe that item?
It is not about teeth. Actually, it is a forensic device that we would use to download cell phone data, PDA data, any type of cell phone or other type of Android phone, in order for us to do forensic examination if we've got a missing individual, criminal investigations, that sort of thing. We currently have the capability to do that at the Regional Forensics Crime Lab. However, it's very labor intensive. We have to take the device there. We would be able to do those examinations, and what that cost would provide us would be the not only the extraction software, but also the forensic examination of that data, because when you think about the number of gigabytes on any type of device like this, it's going to be mountains and mountains of information for us to categorize and examine. So it will assist us in both criminal and other investigations.
Next item on the list is the license plate reader For the last couple of years, the city council, we've had that discussion with you all relative to getting one of those for one of our cars. Secure software for CGIS, recurring cost, and should be built into the operating budget is the way I phrase this. In essence, there's no hardware cost for this item. It's an operating cost of $5,000. It's kind of a important piece of software in this day and age. We'd really like to see it in there. My proposal on this, unlike bringing a person on and paying for them out of available fund balance, where if things go bad, that person has to go away, a piece of software is a little bit different when you look at it. The amounts that I'm going to give you at the end of this would be to perhaps place, similar to what we did for the firing range, place an amount into the restricted revenue fund that represents 10 years worth of these particular payments. If in a future year we can get this fitted into the actual operating budget, we would immediately place it in there and take whatever was left of the $50,000 and place it back into available fund balance for the general fund. Next item is a Morpho ident handheld fingerprint scanner. Chief, you're on.
That would allow the officers in the field, because I know you all will be surprised that people a lot of times don't tell us the truth about who they are. So that would allow us to scan fingerprints in the field to immediately identify individuals who are not being truthful about their identity.
Is that what Cass County just advertised that they have? Did you see that?
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize. Yeah, no, I didn't realize that. Yeah, absolutely. That if you're who you say you are, right?
And from what I understand too, Chief, for those people who are truly innocent, that information is not stored, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Next item on the list is a drone tether system. This is not, initially I thought this was like one of those wrist things that you put on your kindergartner just to make sure the drone doesn't leave you. It's actually, we could get ourselves into a situation where we are hovering over a scene. Let's say it was actually being used for a natural disaster. We may be up there for a long period of time. This allows for the power to go to the drone so that you don't have to bring it down to repower it back up. You can keep it up in the air.
Is it actually physically tethered?
Yes.
Okay.
A continuous data stream and continuous power, so that, as Mr. Feuerborn said, you don't have to land new batteries and that sort of thing. Keeps it up continuously.
Next item on the list is a mobile communications command post vehicle. This is a very high estimate at $500,000. Last year, the council will remember during one of your requests for imminent need, we talked about the fact that while a lot of locations have a command vehicle, an emergency response vehicle for emergency management, we have a trailer. And you all have, as an example, at the 4th of July event, if you've gone in to see Ryan in there and he's sitting with his knees up and you can't see, and it's leaking, if it starts raining, it needs to, everybody remembers that. It leaks like a sieve, and it does. This particular proposal is to open the discussion. If we were to fund this amount, we would be able to go to agencies that can provide grants, go to agencies that can provide equipment for the inside of this thing and say, we've got it funded, but we'd like your help with this particular vehicle. If we're going to be first in Cass County, and we are, eventually we have to decide on how are we going to change that particular trailer out, and are we going to change it out with state-of-the-art, or are we going to change it out with state-of-the-art? So this was to open up that dialogue of discussion with the chief. An important component of this, in my mind, is if we ever get into, we're working very hard to make sure that we have redundant systems. If we ever had a natural disaster where we couldn't meet here and we couldn't meet there, we need a place for the council to meet. And so one of these has to have conference capability and discussion capability so the council can all sit around, especially in a situation like that, so the council can be using it as well and be able to all sit around one table in formal meeting to discuss what's going on out there. Next item, sidewalk installation on the east side of Fox Ridge from Granada to Creekmore Drive. This would be the next step in this, in the sidewalk that we were just now talking about, $550,000. Purchase of church property west of Recreation Park. You may remember I came to you about this, and then we got to thinking, the mayor actually drove by, and I told him that what I would do is approach the pastor and say, really not interested right now, but just out of curiosity, what are you asking? I have a feeling that that may have been one individual at the church approaching us, because it's been radio silence since then. And I've actually spoken with other persons. The email that I originally received was, we are talking about this. Anyone else that I've talked to from that particular church says that has not been a discussion that has gone on. So I'm just wondering if it was one person tepidly putting it out there. What we thought about, and it's not ruled out for the future, even though it may not be out of available fund balance, if they were to approach us, it's a considerable amount of acreage that does sit in a floodplain, but if you look at it, it's the exact same architectural style. If you take the cross and the steeple off of it, it's the exact same architectural style as our Public Works building. Exact same. We are desperately in need of storage. Storage, it has offices and classrooms on the front of it that we could use. The back part and side part could be used for a dog park, because dog parks fit very well in the floodplains. You see things throughout this on the success of archery, both outdoor and indoor. It is a growing sport. That would be a good spot to put an outdoor archery range if we didn't put it up in the north part of Hawk Ridge Park, hopefully keeping it a significant distance away from the dog park component. But we don't hear back from them, so it's not really a viable consideration, this purchase at this time, thus the question marks. Next item on is possibly a large signature sculpture project for Hawk Ridge Park as we get to the point where we're opening up that one for a premier park. Johnson Drive completed to Harmon Drive cut through. We're getting it through to Dean Avenue, continue that on to the Outer Belt Road. Centerview outdoor speakers, it seems like a small item, but it's the #1 request that we get when people want to go in there and rent. Can I get the sound outside as well as inside? Centerview video and recording production equipment is on here as a need. Again, if this building ever went down and we had to go right across the street, we need to be able to both broadcast and record the meeting that's taking place over there. We also get requests from folks who are going in and using it, can I record my party? So this would allow for that as well. Madison Street trail improvements and recreation park. Maybe if I were ranking, possibly our greatest need at $150,000, as the trail loops around and becomes a sidewalk north-south at Recreation Park, and you get to the south side of the circle, it turns in, first of all, it turns into a sidewalk from a trail, but then if we get even the slightest amount of rain, that area floods and you can't use the trail. So $150,000 to put in trail and either boardwalk or a drainage system that actually works underneath that to alleviate that particular problem. You will see that all of the yellowed needs that are on here are items that there is either an imminent failure or an existing failure within the system, or something that is needed should something happen in the very near future, like needing to record over at Centerview. Total amounts. everything that's on this list, and if you consider the $5,000 amount actually being a $50,000 amount, comes to $1,820,200. The total of the needs only comes to $770,500. The total of all of them, with the exception of the Fox Ridge sidewalk and the Johnson Drive extension, $905,200. Of the $1,235,653 in available fund balance, I would strongly suggest to the council that you consider $1 million of that available, and holding back just in case there's an emergency on top of an emergency, $235,653, so available fund balance doesn't go below zero. That concludes staff reports for this evening. We're open to any questions the council may have.
Thank you, sir. So we'll go ahead and discuss it. Are there any discussions of the previous presentations where we talk about this list of items? I think we got through everything on the bulk of the budget itself. And so we'll just move on to this. I think you had your hand up first, Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the emergency management truck, high estimate of $500,000. No problem. You know, that's something that I've even advocated for that. I didn't know it'd cost that much, but no surprise to me. But in the future, would that fall underneath the VERP program, or how would that be funded going forward as upgrades needed? I see that more than a vehicle. I see that as almost an infrastructure on wheels.
I would see the chassis component of it being on the VERP. A large portion of this price includes some high dollar equipment, the interior furnishings that are associated with it, but the VERP portion itself would probably be on a 20 to 25 year vehicle replacement program.
Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was curious on the Madison Street Trail improvements part. Is that the same sidewalk that a lot of times we'll have just a little trickle of water, and so it has some green algae growth, and that I've had several people talk to me about when they're biking or running there, and
that's correct.
It is
the
a liability issue.
The entire portion of the sidewalk would go away and become trail.
It is a liability issue at this point, because I've had multiple people talk to me about it.
Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question's probably get directed to Mr. Murdoch. On the emergency management vehicle or mobile command post, is it possible for him, I know it's a very expensive item and I want to support that, but is it possible for him to send us some information on what we're requesting, maybe some of the capabilities? Can we buy this and add on to it? You know, I know there's a lot of equipment that we could use in this. Do we have to buy it all at once? I don't know if it's worth asking for a presentation at a work session, but if he wouldn't mind emailing us as much information as he could give us, I think it would help maybe get us behind supporting some of that. Thank you.
Sir, staff recognized that this was a high dollar item and one that was going to create a great deal of council interest. So Mr. Murdoch was good enough, and we did anticipate, and at the end of this presentation, I was going to let you all know that first thing out of the chute for the budget presentation at the next work session, because it's going to be a lengthy discussion topic, I actually have in my hands here a white paper from Mr. Murdoch on this item, and we've been exploring with various companies, length, width, height, what things cost, what goes into these things, what could be outside of, what can be done turnkey, what would we be doing, the type of scheduling that would go on with this particular item to get it all put together, how much could we do ourselves. So we will be presenting that to you on September 17th, first thing out of the chute.
Ms. Abdelwood.
I was just going to kind of follow up and answer Mr. Burke's question about the Rec Park Trail. There are really 3 places on that trail that get green and slimy and slippery. This is the part that's really underwater for a few days after it rains. But I wouldn't solve all the parts that are liability, that are slippery places on the trail.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Holman.
In reference to the mobile communications post, Councilmember Berenson works with trucks. I think he could just build us like a transformer type thing, and we could knock this down to like 50 grand, and you know it'll transform into a robot or something for the police to use when we're not using it for this purpose. Yeah, there you go.
Mr. Barber, did you have something?
Thank you. One more question about the mobile command center. I'd like to know what the life cycle is. How long do you think we would actually have that in operation, that expenditure? Because I realize that's a lot of money, but my gut feeling is this is something that is not like a standard vehicle. It's not going to go away in a few years. So
The vehicle itself, again, we would be putting on the VERP at 20 to 25 years. Equipment inside seems to change every year.
I was going to ask the chief, had you talk to the sheriff and see what his ongoing costs are annually with his mobile command center?
Not specifically to Sheriff Weber, but as Mr. Fearborn indicated, you know, we talked to Kansas City about their mobile command center. It's 20 years old now, and of course, you know, because of the type of equipment, the communications equipment inside does change so frequently, you know, we recognize that, you know, we'd be able to make the vehicle last 25 years as long as we are working on those dispatch centers and the things, and the components inside.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on that? Yeah.
One other quick question I thought of while we were going through this, probably a question for Chief. You mentioned that right now we take electronic devices out somewhere for the forensic extraction thing. When we do that, do we generally have to kind of wait in line, or we lower priority for them? What's that wait time when we have to take that out?
Yes, ma'am, and in talking with the detectives in preparation for tonight, we are, because the RCFL is actually located up in the Briarcliff area north of downtown, you know, so it is, you know, time intensive for our detectives to go there. We get 4 free opportunities to bring, you know, our equipment up there, and yes, we do have to wait in line. If it's a very critical case, we're looking for a missing individual, you know, that sort of thing. You know, it's not time we like to expend when a case is very critical and time is of the essence. So being able to do that ourselves and not to have to go up there, even though it's here in Kansas City, it's still, that time is time lost for us sometimes.
Mr. Byrd?
Thank you. Question about the license plate reader. If we had one, would we be able to have it in operation all the time, or to have it operational 24/7? Would we need more than one?
It would be attached to a vehicle, and so there would be considerations about the operation of that vehicle, because you know, our vehicles are parked if they're not being, you know, operated by an officer on duty. So to have that one, we would have to operate that vehicle 24/7 for it to be effective.
For follow-up, for me, just reading some of the things and watching some of our weekly reports, it seems like there is an increase in stolen cars being used to come in and do things where they can steal other cars, and that would certainly be, I think that would be real helpful to keep our citizens away from that.
Well, and it's not only a preventive measure, it's a detection measure as well. I mean, if a crime occurs and those bad guys happen to pass the police car, there's a potential of the recording of that particular item so that they can go back and search their database for that car and potentially that license number if it's found that that's the suspect vehicle at a later time. And you can pinpoint where that area came in contact with it. So it can also be used as evidence in court at a later time as well. Mr. Burns.
Does the license plate reader, does it also capture any video? For example, if we came back and realized that a suspect car had passed it 3 days ago, can we go back and not only pinpoint the location, but does it take any video of that car as well?
I don't think so. I think it's just
reads the plates.
data-driven. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Holman, did you have something?
I've been a proponent of this for some time. I know there's some contrasting opinions, but in addition to the operational benefits of a license plate reader, I think this is something that we can point to our citizens and that our citizens will see is this is another tool, a very visible tool that our police department is using to keep our community safe. And they can roll it out as Kansas City does, whether they're able to do it 24/7. They can certainly roll it out on special occasions. Great example when we have the summer spike in car larcenies and things that Councilmember Burke spoke about. So I think that there's some value in the potential of at least one of these to look at for our community. Our police department and our community safety rank #1 year after year after year on our community surveys and in the community conversations. We cannot overemphasize that element of people's lives here within the city.
I think and I know Chief and I have talked about this on a couple of occasions. The one concern is the right to privacy and how the police department's trust level with the community might be affected by big brother kind of folks that might be anti to this particular device. But I think for the purposes that we've spoke about here tonight, the benefits of such an item, if used in an appropriate fashion, are certainly building upon the use of technology in crime detection within our community. And we can't necessarily hire more police officers. If you spent $25,000 to hire a police officer, there's a package of benefits that goes with that and an ongoing cost. So while there will be some maintenance needs on a regular basis on this particular item, it certainly does put extra set of eyes out there in the community to help us.
One point to dovetail off that is we think of it as a police use. Actually, there's a lot of car recovery units that are already using this technology. These guys go out with these readers and they get a pop and they notify a tow truck to come pick up this vehicle because the owner's delinquent on payments. And so it's being used for other purposes beyond just the standard, what we think of as a standard use for law enforcement. So it's going on.
Mr. Circo.
Talking about that reader, yeah, I can understand. I think if people understand crime, when people steal a car, they don't keep the license plate. They usually put a different plate on that car to go do their crime. It's most generally their case. So with a reader, that reader's going to pop back that this plate does not belong to that car. Now the officer understands there's a problem here. And that happens quite often. I know it does. I like the idea of putting that reader on a car, and if we can down the road adding 2 or 3, I think that gives a distinct advantage to our police officers. When they're driving down the road, if it comes back, my place and my van to me, and they know that, no problem. But if it comes back and there's a problem, now they can pursue that before it gets in a lengthy process where somebody robs a house or hurts somebody, because that's their main goal when they're driving around here in a situation like that, to rob a house or do some kind of crime. So I think it'd be a great addition. I think it'd help our police department and it'd keep us safer because they can catch that middle of the night anytime when they're driving around. I think it's an awesome situation.
Well, keep in mind, too, that it's only going to give you information on the tag. It's not going to give you information about the car. It doesn't do a car description. It only gives you a tag and tag description and ownership, and if there's any warrants associated with that. But it can place a specific tag in a specific area at a given time, if you're there at that time. Yes, Mr. Kellogg.
Just a quick question. I don't want to belabor this, but I do have a question. I heard you say earlier that one of the pieces of equipment we don't keep the data for the privacy issues if not needed. This here's what concerns me is that as we as all law-abiding citizens driving down the street are captured by that for no other reason other than being there lawfully, going to the grocery store, going to the Culver's, going to the car wash. My question is going to be this, because I know I'm going to get it, is am I being tracked in that fashion? Can I be pinpointed, even though I'm not doing anything? Can I be pinpointed by the collection of that data That's the concern,
I mean, it's a legitimate one. The Chief and I have talked about that.
We've talked about,
Yeah.
we've discussed that extensively.
So, yeah, I mean, it is one of the concerns.
Yeah, see, that's what I thought it did more. But I guess if it's just going to read, have a tag belongs to Joe Schmo, or that's all it's going to tell them who the plate belongs to. But if they got any wants or warrants, I guess otherwise they're going to be just seeing a license plate knowing this plate belongs to Jane or Frank or John. I thought it did a lot more than that. Would help give you guys a boost to the vehicle of the plate where it belonged to. I think that would have been, I thought, to me, would have been more appropriate.
Well, and it will do what you ask about, Councilman Circo,
Yeah.
that if the information comes back on the vehicle and it shows on a Chevy and the officer's seeing it on a Ford.
That's what I thought. Will it do that?
Yeah.
But the officer has to make that distinction, not the machine.
Right. Oh, I mean, it won't tell them the plate belongs to John Doe, but it won't tell them what vehicle type it belongs to?
It will.
Yeah, it will.
But the officer has to make that distinction.
Yeah, okay.
If it comes back on a 75 Chevy and it's an 85 Ford,
Yeah.
he has to say, well, that's not a 75 Chevy, that's an 85 Ford.
Yeah, it's what the
That
officer
would-
does with that information.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, okay, that's good. That's what I thought.
Besides warrants, besides, stolen, besides, all of the other things that might show up, through the database, it's also going to provide that officer the information that perhaps that license plate's on the wrong vehicle.
I think that's what I was talking about. I think that's very important for the officer. We've got very studious officers. They're always going that extra mile. So if he sees that, it's going to raise a red flag in his mind. Why does this plate belong to this? And it's on this. Right now, there could be an issue with that. And I mean, it gives them an advantage. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Did you have something else? Oh, Mr. Delroy?
I was just going to say, officers can call the tag into dispatch and find that same information.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
you're right.
that's not information we wouldn't have otherwise.
Mr. Kellogg?
I guess I'm going to add something positive here. The positive thing that I see out of this as a benefit to the community, as for safety and welfare as a whole, is in the case of where we get the emergency announcements in the radio and on our telephones. Look out for this car because this car is associated with this abduction, or this car is associated with this case out of North Kansas City. I see that, and that's the real value of it, because for putting myself in that position as the officer, when you've got whatever our traffic counts are on 58, that reader doesn't miss it. If it goes by there, I realize that, but the officers are already stressed with their day in, day out, so I see the value for that, and I believe we owe that to our citizens and the public as a whole. That's what they pay for their safety, and that's why they come here. But I still just have to worry about the privacy issue of people who don't need to be tracked or don't need to be spotted for just going down the street. So.
Sure. Do you have something else?
Well, again, and I don't think most of our police officers are following a car. They don't always going to call the plate in because you're not doing anything wrong. They're going to assume it's okay. Well, with that particular device, it would come back and it would show to them, the reader, that there's a problem. So this gives them a heads up. Otherwise, I know they're not calling in every plate, every car. They're driving down the street. So they wouldn't be calling those in normally anyway. But this would actually give them a first-hand shot. Boom, we got a problem with this plate and car.
Well, and that's absolutely correct. The officers are building their reasonable suspicion or probable cause if they're preparing to stop a car because they've done something, some traffic violation, something like that. These license plate readers are reading hundreds of plates in the course of minutes, and only giving a hit to the officer if something is amiss.
Mr. Fearborn?
Thank you, sir. Any other questions on any other component of this? Again, staff stands prepared to, when you have those questions, we'll be introducing the budget as the first agenda item on the next 2 work sessions. Just would like to conclude this evening by saying it would be an impossible task to put this budget together and present it to you in this type of a format and as clean as it is, without every single person who's sitting behind me here. They agonize over it as much as I do, probably more because of me. And I give them my sincerest thanks.
You're all nodding yes. And we
actually have the neat part about where we're at in time now is they don't just sit back. They come to me with thoughts. They come to me with ideas. The CIP committee this year, we actually went with a larger CIP committee. The CIP committee now consists of, if I can find it here, back to the beginning. The chief, from the standpoint of how do these impact public safety, these projects, Mr. Carteret, Mr. Icky, Mr. Crass, Mr. Mayberry, Mr. Mustine, and Ms. Watson, they meet every single Monday throughout the year. Because one of the items that we found was without that type of communication, and they meet throughout the year, without that type of communication, you didn't have that input of, well, what's this new ball field going to do to public safety? What's it going to do to our communications program? Now that interaction is taking place with those projects. My sincere thanks to both Ms. Watson, because she does the numbers and verifies them for me, as well as our city accountant, Ms. Elisa Williams. My sincere thanks to Mr. Icky, because he and Melissa are responsible for the beauty of the book that comes before you. These folks are dynamite to work with. And my sincere thanks to Ms. Bratton lastly, because she puts up with me in my morose moods as I'm going through the budget season every single day. Thank you all, and that concludes staff reports.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as he said, we're going to have work sessions. Next two following work sessions, first item will be the budget. Further discussion can occur with regard to what we ended our meeting here with today, or any other portion of the budget that you'd like, that you might find later to be concerning to you, and you'd like further clarification on or suggestions for. But unless there's something else, Mr. Holman.
I wanted to thank Mr. Fearborn and all of staff again. I thought the budget last year was very impressive, and I thought this outdid that one, both in aesthetic looks, the consistent, comprehensive pouring over of the numbers to meet the needs of our citizens. I really thought this was exceptional. You know, when you first come into this, the first time you look at it, it's a pretty overwhelming document. I think Tom would probably agree as a new member. As you sit here a couple of years and you see it, you compare it to the year after, and just like everything else within the city, all city services, all amenities that we provide, the staff has taken a great turn under your leadership, Mr. Fearborn, to not only what do we do, but what should we do? How can we make the lives of our citizens better? This document reflects that, sir. Very well done.
Anything else? If not, we're done for the evening. Thank you.